Horatio Gates tried to overthrow George Washington without firing a shot. His weapon was a 20-year-old French general named Lafayette and an army that barely existed. Gates had just emerged from Saratoga as the hero of America's greatest victory. Washington had lost Philadelphia. His army was freezing and starving at Valley Forge, and Gates's allies in Congress were beginning to ask whether the wrong general was commanding the revolution. Gates now served as president of the powerful Board of War. From there, he could influence military strategy, appointments, and new campaigns, while steadily weakening Washington's authority. But one man remained firmly at Washington's side: the Marquis de Lafayette. Lafayette was young, ambitious, and desperate to prove himself. But he was also the most famous French volunteer in America, and one of the strongest links between Washington and the French support the revolution desperately needed. As long as Lafayette stood beside Washington, removing the commander-in-chief risked alienating France, so Gates decided to remove Lafayette first. The Board of War offered him the opportunity of a lifetime: command of a new Northern Army, an invasion of Canada, and the chance to conquer an entire country before his 21st birthday. It was exactly the kind of mission an ambitious young officer might find impossible to refuse. Lafayette accepted, but he did not trust Gates. He agreed to lead the expedition only if George Washington remained his overall commander. Lafayette believed that condition would protect Washington, but Gates had constructed the mission so that almost every possible outcome still benefited him. If Lafayette conquered Canada, Gates and the Board of War could claim credit for designing the campaign. If Lafayette remained in the North, preparing the invasion, Washington would lose his most influential French supporter, while Gates's allies moved against him in Congress. And if Lafayette marched into Canada and suffered a disaster, Gates could destroy both men at once. Lafayette would be condemned as young, reckless, and unfit for command. Washington would be condemned for allowing his favored subordinate to lead an American army to destruction. Success or failure, Gates expected to emerge stronger. Then Lafayette arrived in Albany, and the grand army he had been promised was nowhere to be found. Instead of thousands of prepared soldiers, fewer than 1,200 were fit for duty. The men were poorly clothed. Many had not been paid. Supplies were missing. There were not enough troops, weapons, provisions, or transportation to invade Canada in the middle of winter. Lafayette finally saw the plan clearly. Gates had offered him glory, but had only given him the means to create a catastrophe. He was expected to be ambitious enough to march anyway. If he succeeded, Gates would take the credit. If he failed, Gates would use the disaster against Washington. But Gates had underestimated Lafayette. He was ambitious, but he was not reckless. He refused to sacrifice an unprepared army for his own reputation. He documented how badly the Board of War had deceived him. He abandoned the impossible invasion. And instead of turning against Washington, Lafayette openly reaffirmed his loyalty to him. That was the one outcome Gates had not prepared for. There was no conquest for the Board of War to claim, no destroyed army to blame on Washington, and Lafayette would not remain isolated in the North while Gates maneuvered against the commander-in-chief. France's most famous volunteer returned to Washington's side at Valley Forge and made his position unmistakable. He stood with George Washington, and with America increasingly dependent on French assistance, removing Washington now carried an even greater political cost. Gates had tried to use Lafayette to destroy Washington. Instead, Lafayette saw through the plot, and it soon collapsed.